Good evening, everyone. Official scorecard is here. So, welcome to the 38th episode of the Coup d'etat of Boxing podcast. Tonight on the menu, first and foremost, Rodriguez versus Rungvisai, fight that took place the last weekend. And yeah, there are going to be a few words of some other fights as well. But mostly this one, which was the main event the last weekend of the zone card. Right now, I'm going solo. We'll see if corruption will be able to jump on or not. I don't know for sure. But yeah, let's start it without wasting any time. Um, yeah, Bam Rodriguez versus Sir Rungvisai. Well, first of all, I will do the technical breakdown, but without going into too much details, as it often gets very confusing for a listener to listen a podcaster who's describing the technical details of a fight without being able to see the footage of it. But I'll still do it only with less details. In general, I saw a lot of feints, jab, different type of jabs, lateral movement, and a lot of other good footwork from Jesse Bam Rodriguez since the very beginning of the fight. Now that jab is becoming deadlier and deadlier weapon for Bam as he started stepping in competition. Although he's been always using it, not only in Lomachenko-like fashion to create the openings and set up his other punches, but he was also using it as a weapon of its own to hurt and score points with it since the very beginnings of his career. But as he's stepping up in competition, that jab is also becoming more impressive. When you take a look, the opponents against whom his jab is finding success. But another thing started happening since he stepped up in competition too, at least for now. Unlike the majority of his professional career, where he's fluidly moving in between all three ranges, meaning short, mid, and long range, nowadays, at least when you take into account his last two fights against Quadras and Rungvisai, he seems a bit more reluctant to step into short range, at least not until the later stages of the fight when the steam is taken off of his opponent punches, which is not a critique, of course, because it is understandable as his opponents also became better, bigger, and are better punchers than those earlier opponents. So he's not going to get into same risks that he was getting against the lesser opposition. But I would say that since the beginning of the fight, that jab of Jesse Rodriguez was very explosive and accurate. It was landing hard, both up and down. Okay, of course, it was still being used as a feint to set up other punches as well. And I would say mainly Bam's right hook to Rungvisai's head, because what I noticed Bam doing against Rungvisai, jabbing him up and down, and then feinting a jab downstairs to come up with the right hook upstairs. And then spin out and get out of range, which was really, really catching Rungvisai flush. And it was a very good punch. And again, the jab, it was making Rungvisai, put his rear glove in front of him, in front of his face. So the side of his face wasn't guarded, and it was open for that right hook of Jesse Rodriguez that he was landing very nicely since the first round, I think. Then from the third round on, after the initial shock of Bam's quickness, volume, and power that were all preventing Rungvisai from taking off his offense, Rungvisai started having even more success pressuring. Uh, Rungvisai started having success more than in the initial two rounds. He was able to pressure Bam Rodriguez a bit more and to close the distance more often coming forward. However, even in those rounds, Bam was often beating him to the punch with more compact and quicker punches and his better timing. What Bam was doing, he was throwing check hooks and quick uppercuts on the move as he was using his lateral movement, as he was getting out of pocket. Uh, when Rungvisai was coming at him, looking to close the distance, and when, for example, Rungvisai would have him on the ropes and would set his feet to throw a punch, Bam was using his quickness and better timing to throw a compact uppercut or hook and then pivot out or use the lateral movement to get out of range. And he was beating him to the punch on the ropes, at least at the beginning. But on the other hand, in between, let's say, approximately in between the third and the fifth or the sixth round, I'd say Rungvisai had success too, especially when Bam was staying in the pocket to exchange with Rungvisai without getting out, without stepping out of pocket like he was doing at the beginning of the fight. So when Bam was more willing to trade, or when he was forced by Rungvisai to trade and stay in the pocket, Rungvisai was in fact winning many of those exchanges, to the point that his studding punches through the target were making Bam forget his own offense at the time and making him cover up instead, looking to block Rungvisai's punches instead of looking to land his own punches. And so at those moments, Rungvisai was especially hurting Bam Rodriguez to the body. He landed, I would say, a lot of good body punches, although he wasn't able to land nearly as many body punches that he needed to land in order to endanger Bam. But when he was able to do it in the pocket, I was able to see that he was hurting Bam Rodriguez, and he was also exploiting Bam's tendency, which I mentioned in my breakdown of Jesse Rodriguez on my solo channel. His tendency of stiff arming the opponents and extending his arms to push the opponents off of him and create some room. So Rungvisai was using those moments to attack him to the body, to counter Jesse Rodriguez, extending his arm with a punch to the body, and it worked nicely for him. The limited amount of times that Jesse stayed in the pocket, and but among the earlier mentioned skills that gave a lot of success to Bam, he was also using his jab, often doubling and tripling it, to set up his straight left and overhand lefts. Those jabs were not only forcing Rungvisai to concentrate on his defense and shell up, those jabs in fact were making him shell up in a particular manner. Being with both fighters being southpaws, Jesse Rodriguez doubling and tripling his jabs were making Rungvisai do a couple of things. They were pushing him on his back foot, and Rungvisai was also getting low, trying to get low, ducking and he was also narrowing his stance in a Filichella-like stance, where he was hiding behind his shoulder, um, and looking to block and parry punches with his rear hand, but not being covered up well enough behind that shoulder, and as well as him getting low over his rear foot, and Bam being also taller than him. It was easy for Bam Rodriguez to land his left hands constantly on him in those exchanges. So it was very nothing complicated as a setup. Uh, Sticking the jab in his face, doubling and tripling it, and that's how he was finding the opening over that shoulder of Rungvisai for the left hands. And okay, at the later stages of the fight, Rungvisai started fading despite fighting, I would say, valiantly, before ultimately getting overwhelmed by Bam's offense. Now, I don't really need to break down that part of the fight more than I just did in one single phrase. Um, and another thing, Sergio Mora, the next time, please get brother a shout out when quoting my breakdown. It would really be appreciated. I'm serious about it. Um, yeah, so this was kind of like technical breakdown of the fight. Uh, but I have more things to say about Jesse Rodriguez. Uh, then this is going to be interesting. So recently on Twitter, I saw a part of an interview Chocolatito gave in which he was discussing some fights he had. And I think he was talking about his rematch fight with Rungvisai, where he said that he was very aware that it would have been a much easier fight for him if he was stepping out of pocket, walking, moving away, using his footwork. But he said that he made a conscious decision to fight it out instead of backing up. Um, but and so he said also in his own words that it's not his style, and he literally said, "I will die with my boots on, and that's how I die." Meaning that despite knowing what would be a smarter way to fight Rungvisai, especially in the rematch, he chose to stick to his style and fight the way that he wants to fight and that he always fought in. So this brings me to my point of comparing Jesse Rodriguez's performance against Rungvisai to those of Chocolatito and Estrada, where I'm going to do a comparison in between Rodriguez's performance against Rungvisai with those other performances and give a short overview of how each style of those fighters meshed with the style of Rungvisai. Sorry for the background noises. My dog is drinking his water. Yeah, so let me find it again. Sorry for the background noises. Just hold on a second. Okay. Yeah, so when it comes to Chocolatito, Chocolatito was to to Rungvisai a small pressure fighter opponent with a very high punch output, and who was also very compact and had great timing. But in overall, to Rungvisai, Chocolatito was a small pressure fighter with a very high punch output and volume. He gave Rungvisai hell the first time he fought him, and it was a fight I believe Chocolatito won anyways. But being that Chocolatito was more of a volume puncher who at that time was in a relatively new weight class for him, he just moved up. Uh, it was like was it third or second fight at 115 at the time, and he didn't have enough single punch power and explosiveness that would derail Rungvisai from staying in the pocket and trading with him. Uh, Estrada, on the other hand, was, I would say, a smooth counterpuncher or a boxer who was light-footed and happy enough to use his movement that he was giving Rungvisai more room to come forward. Uh, Estrada's footwork was supposed to keep Rungvisai off balance, and it did to some extent, but his punching style wasn't of an explosive, sharp shooter or of a fighter with a very hard jab. So both those styles that Estrada used with his footwork and I mean him moving around the ring and also not being an explosive sharp shooter. Um, that style wasn't making Rungvisai think twice before stepping into Estrada's range. Instead, Estrada was a combination puncher who would, one, set his feet and start throwing combos instead of constantly punching on the move and punching hard on the move. Instead, whenever Estrada chose to throw his punches, for the most part, especially in, I mean, it's debatable, but that's in overall how I would say he fought Rungvisai. So every time he set his feet in order to throw his combos, or when he was punching on the move, those were light punches. And the second thing is, Estrada, he threw a lot of quick but light setup punches to finally set up one big punch. It was also visible in Estrada fighting Chocolatito as well. So he would throw these quick flurries that are very nice and quick and very clever combos. But a lot of those punches, the initial punches, are setup punches. He usually uses multiple setup punches to set or to finally set one big punch. So I would say these things were giving Rungvisai enough room to get off his offense and win a lot of exchanges because they were not presenting as big of a danger to Rungvisai to the point of him backing up or getting gun shy. Meanwhile, Jesse Bam Rodriguez was a perfect, I would say, aggregate of tools and style needed to cause discomfort to Rungvisai. Sharp footwork and angles, capable of throwing explosive punches on the first measure or on the first beat, then a quick and hard jab, explosive jab, then punching through the target, then explosive punches, as well as a high volume of hard punches. Those things were all preventing Rungvisai from getting off his offense in a way Estrada couldn't, or even Chocolatito couldn't to some extent. So yeah, I kind of described you the difference in styles, those how each style, how the styles of each of those fighters matched up against the Rungvisai style. And so it brings me to the often asked question. So it goes, Rodriguez was impressive in beating Rungvisai like now no one else could, but he was old, he was out of his prime. So yeah, it's true that Rungvisai was old and out of his prime, but on the other hand, nothing indicated that Rungvisai beat him only due to Rungvisai's age and that he wouldn't be able to beat Rungvisai in his prime at all. The earlier mentioned stylistic advantages are already suggesting that Bam would stand a very solid chance at beating a prime Rungvisai at least. More than that, let's not act as if Rungvisai was a sad shell of himself the last weekend. Not only that he showed up for this fight very well prepared physically, uh, with probably a great training camp, at least judging by the shape, by the physical shape he showed up in, but he wasn't looking bad in the ring neither. In my opinion, he was uh, looking to do same things that he was doing before, but of course, it's not prime Rungvisai. Um, and when I say that Rungvisai was looking good in the ring, I mean is that he was looking as good as Rodriguez's style was allowing him to look. Because, like I said many times, Rodriguez's style and how it matched up with Rungvisai's style was what was deciding on many of those exchanges that 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 end up favorably to Rodriguez, with Rodriguez winning the most of the exchanges in the fight. So Prime Rungvisai would have given Rodriguez a harder fight without any doubt. But instead of blaming everything on his age, one should ask himself if a poorly prepared shell of Rungvisai would have withstood the amount of explosive punches through the target while being kept off balance with the right type of footwork, just like Rodriguez did in this fight. In my opinion, no way it could happen. So if Rungvisai was this poorly prepared in the shell of himself, uh, I would say he would get stopped much earlier than that. Instead, he took a lot of great explosive punches through the target, uh, and how often very good hard punches were landing on his head, on his face. He wouldn't be able to withstand it as long as he did in that fight. More so, there were multiple occasions where Rodriguez stopped controlling the range with his power and volume, and Rungvisai used those moments to get in the pocket and exchange with him, winning a lot of those exchanges and landing the more punishing and more powerful thudding blows than Rodriguez was at those moments, with a lot of them landing on Rodriguez's body and hurting him, like I said earlier. So to go even further, some people are saying that Rungvisai was so past his best that he was failing of balance whenever he would throw a big punch, and that this was happening all the time, and also that his hand speed was too slow. Well, about his hand speed, at his age, 35, as a super flyweight, I would say his hand speed did become slower, but not by much. He was never a fighter with a great hand speed, and it's not as if he faded so much that he was a shell of himself. Um, This was, in my opinion, the best physically prepared version of Rungvisai that he could be at the age of 35. And as far as him failing off balance on every big punch he threw, I doubt those people really watched Rungvisai at his prime, as the one I was watching. He was doing the same thing even in his prime, meaning throwing big punches and failing off balance. So yeah, I don't know where it comes from, as if he wasn't doing it during his prime, but some people obviously miss that fact. Now, despite being impressed with Rodriguez's performance, I'm not going to pretend that every single thing I saw was perfect. On the contrary, there are some things that indicated to me that Rodriguez may have some performances in the future where I can very well end up being disappointed. So there are three things. Number one, clinching, having as huge of a threat for an opponent as Rungvisai. It is in fact understandable to clinch under his pressure in order to pivot around him and replace the ropes for the center of the ring. But it tells me that Bam Rodriguez has no problem using it as a legitimate boxing tactic in the future whenever it's needed. But here's my problem. Me personally, I do not see clinching as a legitimate boxing tactic at all. I hate it, and I see it as a foul, as it should be seen. I think it's a shame that the referees started allowing it more and more often throughout the years. But anyways, I totally hate it. Number two, I don't know how to describe it the other way than size bullying, but this is not so clear because I always saw Rungvisai as a big 115 pounder, especially in comparison to, let's say, Chocolatito. But Pam Rodriguez, who just fought a fight ago at 115 for the first time, Bam Rodriguez was even way bigger than Rungvisai in the ring that night. To his credit, he just beat Rungvisai, who's not a small fighter neither, like I said. And a fight before, he beat another huge 115 pounder in Carlos Cuadras, who was maybe as big as Bam Rodriguez, or maybe even bigger than Rodriguez in the ring that night. So these two fights rightfully earned Bam Rodriguez a lot of credit, and at the same time served as a proof that Bam Rodriguez is not beating fighters only thanks to his size. Plus, if anything else, he uses more boxing skills than his physical advantages in the ring. But it would still be false to say that he doesn't use the physical advantages at all. Also, after the Quadras fight, he admitted feeling the difference in power in between 112-pounders and 115-pounders punches, which is understandable to some extent, as fighters always need to get used to the punches of heavier opponents before they eventually move up. So it doesn't matter, even if a guy who's huge for 112 but never fought at 115, he needs some time to get used to sparring and fighting 115-pounders before moving up. But at the same time, it makes you wonder how well a fighter like him, for example, would take punches when constantly fighting the opponents of the same size. Now, Bam announced that he will be moving back to 112 division, and I think that it is a good move to solidify his resume even further by trying to clean out the division as long as he's still able to make that weight cut. But the majority of those fights, in my opinion, won't improve his pound-for-pound status because he will be fighting smaller opponents. However, there is one exception, and the only reason I would like to see him again at 112, and it is the fight against another extremely talented and also big 112-pounder whose name is Junto Nakatani. So yeah, anyone who, if you never heard of him, a lot of you did, remember that name, Junto Nakatani. So that's not the 135-pounder who fought Lopez and Loma. Anyways, the third thing that I dislike about Rodriguez were low blows that he doesn't seem to shy away from using when feeling the need to do so. They're seeming to come either at the moments of frustration or at the moments where he's struggling with the opponent's pressure, volume, or body punches. Since his earlier fights, I saw it as well as a tendency to lean over the opponents and push them down, which is another tactic that, like I said, I hate and is illegal. And in the Quadras fight, I saw Bam Rodriguez throwing low blows as well, but I also saw Quadras doing the same thing to him. Quadras maybe landed even more low blows than Bam Rodriguez himself. And looking back at it now, I think I should have included that information to my breakdown video of Jesse Rodriguez on my solo channel. Anyways, in my opinion, it was an impressive performance from Jesse Bam Rodriguez, who showed all these other so-called future boxing stars how it's done and what it takes to get the real credit and to really earn your pound for pound status instead of having pathetic career of soft fights, overrated opponents, fixes, easy layups set by the promoters or by the boxing establishment, as well as fights against the geriatric versions of once great fighters. So yeah, big credit to Bam. Once again, the coup d'etat boxing, we were the first one who, I think we did the first breakdown video on Bam Rodriguez. Um, beside the insiders in boxing business, we were the first ones, the first fans talking about him. We had him as our best, how do you say, best young fighter for 2 past years up till this year. Now he's already a champion. Anyways, yeah. On that same card, Murajan Akhmadaliev was fighting Ronnie Rios. Ronnie Rios, talking about weight bullies. Yeah, Ronnie Rios is huge. And Ronnie Rios, from the limited amount of time I gave to watching his fights, he seems like, thanks to his size, a very, very good puncher, a very strong fighter at the division. And yeah, but he lacks skills, many things that he lacks. In this fight, as we saw, he even lacked the urgency to win or the willingness to push forward when Murajan Akhmadaliev got his hand hurt from the fourth round on, if I'm not wrong. Anyways, I wasn't paying 100% attention to that fight. But in overall, contrary to most people bigging up this performance of Akhmadaliev, who I do like as a boxer very much, but I stopped expecting great things from Akhmadaliev as well, from the most of the Uzbekistani fighters who are fighting along with him, training along with him. Is it in Joel Diaz's camp? So the way I see it, this generation of Uzbekistanis who are currently in the US with Diaz, they're all technically well schooled, especially with their footwork, but they really lack defense. Also, no matter what their fighting styles are, nearly all of them seem to be one-dimensional in their particular styles. Now, I may be wrong as I haven't examined them closely yet, but they seem to be that way to me. I saw something similar even with Hassanboy Dusmatov, who's a very talented. I think he's a light flyweight, if I'm not wrong. Anyways, physically very, very gifted, very talented fighter, but seeing pretty similar to what Murajan Akhmadaliev showed in this fight, very limited in his approach, uh, on one hand, it's understandable you cannot expect all the fighters to know everything and to demand too much of them. But I think that the limits are just set and they're obvious to those boxing fans like myself who are paying close attention. So yeah, I like what he's doing, but he doesn't even know to change his approach to set up punches. Uh, I don't know. Plus the defense is non-existent. Um, but again, I have to repeat myself. I haven't really paid a close attention yet to any of the Uzbekistani fighter, so I may be wrong about them. They may prove me wrong. I hope so, but they all seem to lack defense and not to know how to change their approach and switch up things in order to be more effective. And I was speaking during the fight night this last weekend. I was exchanging messages with corruption in boxing, talking about it, and he said, and he was right about it. He said they're trying to adapt to that professional Mexican style, but in order to become more attractive kind of boxers to the viewers. But man, it can be very nice, very exciting to watch, but also very frustrating, and it brings a lot of risk, especially when you put those fighters against the highest possible level of opposition. Now, people are talking a lot about the potential fight in between Rojan Akhmadaliev with Stephen Fulton Jr., which I would love to see, but I haven't really thought about that fight yet. But from what I've seen from Fulton, uh, he has more. He's a more rounded fighter. He can fight on the outside or on the inside. I don't even know. I'm not sure about Akhmadaliev if he can really fight on the inside. But I don't know. You know me very well, guys. You know that I hate to give any prediction before examining uh, and comparing their fights, their fighting styles, without doing my analysis. So I haven't thought deeply about it yet about that matchup. Would I love to see it? I would very much, but even with Stephen Fulton, who I was very high on, and I kind of, I still look at him as a very talented boxer, not only physically, but when it comes to boxing skills. But I have some doubts about him. But again, even him, I haven't really examined his style and his fights to really give you any detailed breakdown of him or how that fight would go in between him and Akhmadaliev. But yeah, I just wanted to mention those couple of things about Akhmadaliev, which reminded me of his Uzbekistani brothers from the same training camp, from the same training facilities, and reminded me once again of those similarities, striking similarities, negative similarities in between them all. And for the last Elvin Lapulga Soto, um, light flyweight, he faced Heki Budler in Soto's home country of Mexico. Now, Heki Budler was a very good boxer, very exciting boxer, uh, top class fighter in his division a few years ago. until he got defeated by Hiroto Kyoguchi and stopped in a very good, very exciting fight. Was it in 2018? I'm not sure, something like that. Anyways, after the defeat against Kyoguchi, Budler retired and he was out of ring up till the last year. The last year he fought on a card in his home country of South Africa, and his performance was nothing crazy, but not bad neither. And it was expected for him to, to get rounds in, to try to shake off some ring rust. And I wanted to say something else, but I got deconcentrated by my dog who wants out. Sorry for that. Yeah, but yeah, his performance in that comeback fight of Budler was nothing crazy, but it got overly criticized back then, in my opinion. While from what I remember, it was not that bad at all. Only that he was coming back from a long layoff, as well as him. Again, I forgot what I wanted to say. Sorry. Anyways, this fight, I haven't seen it yet. I have downloaded it. I'm about to watch it tonight, tomorrow. But so don't take this as a false advertisement. But I really wanted the names of these two fighters to be on the title of our podcast. And I have just a very few words to say about the fight, being that I haven't watched it. I watched the last round only. I caught it live. But yeah, being that Budler, he was one of the first fighters who I started watching when I started learning more about the light flyweight division. Budler, who's now in his 30s, old. I don't know. Maybe he can have a title fight. I'm not sure. Hopefully, he would be able to get the title because he's a likable character. But yeah, in this fight, I watching previous Soto's fights, I knew that Elvin Soto, is limited in his approach. He fights in a very similar manner to, and I described him this way to corruption. I described Soto as a light flyweight version of Canelo Alvarez, always needing to set his feet, etc. He probably has he has probably a higher work rate than Canelo, but also is probably excuse me, please, more limited maybe than Canelo is. I'm not sure about it. Anyways, he struggles with boxers a lot. So it was seen in two of his previous fights. One was against the Puerto Rican Jonathan La Bomba Gonzalez, who's a very nice, very smooth, very quick, very sharp boxer slash counter puncher that is very underrated. And I was so glad for Bomba Gonzalez that he was able to defeat Soto. Nothing personal against Soto. I just like the guy, and the way he was schooling Kose Tanaka for a couple of rounds before getting stopped in Japan was also very nice to see. A few years ago, was it 2 years ago? I think, I'm not sure. Anyways, if you don't have a lot of time but want to see the skills and the capabilities, boxing capabilities of Jonathan Gonzalez, you can put that fight in between him and Tanaka, turn off the sound, and see how nicely he was boxing, countering Kose Tanaka, running him into punches. Very quick puncher, very nice fighter. So yeah, he was giving Soto hell with movement. And a fight before that, yeah, also always forget his name. Another very old fighter for this weight class who was retired before. Is it Takayama, the guy who fought Chocolatito Gonzalez in 2012? He's another boxer, pure boxer, although with less defensive skills than Heki Budler or what's his name, Jonathan Gonzalez. But a pure boxer, he was also giving Elvin Pulgasodo hell, and it was funny. He's a character. Go and watch that fight between Takayama and Soto, and you'll see what I mean. And go see his reaction after I would say premature stoppage by the referee that night. Anyways, those fights, especially these two last fights that Elvin Pulgasoto had before fighting Heki, they let me know that he's going to be struggling. Although, at one hand, I was kind of worried because Heki, he had just one comeback fight, and I think it took place more than a year ago or a year ago after a three-year long layoff. And so, first of all, I was not sure if Heki would show up 100% prepared, but I knew that stylistically he will give Pulgasodo hell, and apparently it was the case. A guy in the chat room on Discord, right after the card with Bam Rodriguez and Rungvisai ended, he was there commenting what was happening in the fight because he was watching it. Me, I caught only the last round, and so he was telling us Heck is probably about to get trapped because apparently, going by his words, what he described to us, Hecky Budler was schooling Soto, but as anybody else, he was expecting a robbery, a home cooking decision too. And to that point, before that fight, I bet on that fight, and I bet on Soto, but I bet on Soto by robbery because I was expecting Heki to deserve the victory, but ultimately get an L by the way of robbery. And it would have been the case, but in that last 12th round, the only one that I managed to see, he dropped Soto. And so thanks to that knockdown, he ended up winning. I think it was on all three scorecards by a point or two. I think it was by 2 points. So that 12th round, imagine that if he never scored a knockdown in that fight, not only that he wouldn't be given a 10-8 round in the last round, but also that round would probably go to Soto anyways. If what I heard about this fight is true, then during that last 12th round, these these judges were probably all about to give Soto a 10-9 final round, And when the knockdown happened, they were forced to give Heki a 2-point advantage round. And so that's basically how he got this victory. If he never scored that knockdown, he would have an L on his record now, another L. And so, at one hand, I was pissed because, it's almost a sure thing to bet on a robbery, because the boxing establishment rarely disappoints you. But it looks like it wasn't the case in this fight, partially because Heki had, who was never anything close to a solid puncher, scored a knockdown. And by the way, just a bit earlier, a few weeks earlier, we had another surprise where the boxing establishment almost robbed a fighter in Bivol, but they didn't. By the way, hold on. A shout out to Duck as well as Paja, who are both here, and anyone else listening. So, okay, you guys were leaving the comments, writing comments in the chat, but I wasn't able to see them as I was talking about these fights. So let me go through them. Paja said Chocolatito didn't give angles to Rungvisai the way Bam did. Interesting, Paja. Maybe you're right, but to be honest, it's been a very long time since I saw that fight, so I cannot recall it. But possible. He then continued, Alto Chokofot, a younger, fresher Rungvisai. Yeah, definitely, spot on. Yeah, for sure, Rungvisai was fresher, no doubt about it. He was 29, 30 at the time. Paj also said, not over impressed by MJ. Yeah, I mean, look, he has some very nice skills. Look, he's a fighter who excels at those few things that he does incredibly well. Those few things that he's fantastic at doing. But I'm seeing many exploitable holes there in his boxing. A lot of limitations, that's all I'm saying. Duck, big up to Duck. He's saying, Sup, Budler needed that knockdown to win, lol. Complete nonsense. I had it 9-3. Oh, so we have Duck here, for anyone who doesn't know him, a very knowledgeable boxing fan. Apparently he saw the fight and he scored it 9-3 for Heki Budler plus the knockdown. So yeah, Duck is confirming what already heard about the fight. Not surprising at all. He says Soto is a flat-footed swinger. I picked Budler to win. Yeah, great minds think alike. Padgett then said Soto barely throws any punches. Budler wasn't that active either. Yeah. Budler was never a super active fighter, but from what I remember, he's hold on. In fact, I'm not sure. Cannot remember for sure. It's been a while since I watched his fights. From what I remember, and I repeat, I may be wrong, but I thought that his punching output, at least years ago, was solid, but I don't remember for sure. So take it for what it is. But what is interesting, Soto barely throws any punches. Yeah, kind of like Canelo. You're right about it. Maybe, okay, as a flyweight, all the flyweights will throw more punches than a super middleweight food, especially Canelo. But yeah, I'm not surprised if his work rate is as low as well. Doug saying we were talking about Rungvisai being washed before the fight. I think it showed. Doug, see, I'm not sure if I would agree, and to what point I would agree. Washed? No. I mean, yeah, you and me, we talked about how he's on a downslide. It's it's understandable. I do agree with it. It's um, it's not a secret that he was on a downslide. I do agree with you, but I also told you that I think it was up to the opposition level because let's take a look at that. Was it his very last fight or the two last fights he had against the low level position? The first two rounds he would do nothing at all. At least he was giving his opponents even the opportunity to punch him, and then from third round on he would turn in and you know uh, get to a higher pace, start fighting at a higher pace. So I would say it was a mixture of things. So naturally, yeah, uh, he did slow down without any doubt, but I think that the way he was prepared, that he was way better prepared for Bam Rodriguez than he was prepared for a couple of his previous opponents, and whenever he was in the range to punch, I thought that what I saw from him was very solid, although I'm not trying to blow it out of proportions. Uh, yeah, he was not the same, he was lower, but not by much. Um, that's about it. That's how I see it. So of course, it doesn't mean that all of us will have the same opinion, but that's how I saw it. Uh, and Doug says it kind of looked like Bivol versus Canelo, that Budler versus Soto fight. Yes. Interesting. Interesting. Anyways, yeah, I will watch it. If not tonight, tomorrow. Uh, I started downloading all these fights that are taking place uh, that were taking place in the past few months. I'm downloading them one by one. Of course, the ones that I'm interested in watching, seeing. So yeah, that fight is another fight that I downloaded and I'm about to watch it. Anyways, guys, thank you a lot for being here. Uh, if you appreciated the stream, hit the like, and it would be also appreciated to share it on social networks. Thank you for listening and for tuning in. This was the 38th episode of the Coup d'etat Boxing official scorecard, telling you goodbye. Good night.